your identification from your ego to your soul. And your soul will be in your heart. And the soul witnesses the incarnation.
Kindred souls, as we begin, we take a moment to honor the foundational hearts, the ones who saw the need for the sanctuary and dared to plant the seed. We acknowledge every hand that has tended this garden, from the first whispered idea to the vibrant evolution we sit in today. To those who began this group, your seva has created a clearing in the woods where we can finally breathe. Today, we honor that service by being fully present. We recognize that our collective strength is built upon your individual commitment to self-seva, the quiet daily practice of returning to your own heart because you chose to work on yourselves. We have a place to work together. We are here, we are seen, and we are home. So we're walking each other home, and this month, the third installment, the third chapter, is about suffering. So as we settle into the sanctuary, take a moment to be here now, centering yourself in the loving awareness that brought us together today. We gather as a community that honors individual differences and celebrates the full spectrum of gender and sexuality. Ram Dass reminded us that we must have a strong sense of who we are before we can engage in social action, and this affinity group provides the essential, inclusive environment to explore our shared experiences soul to soul. As we step into this new year, we are evolving our practice. We're moving deeper into the spirit of mutuality, recognizing that every person in this circle is both a giver and a receiver. In the tradition of Pure Run Warm Lines, we are here to offer a listening ear and emotional support, not to fix or cure one another. We adopt a trauma-informed lens, shifting our focus from what is wrong to what is strong, and most importantly, what is happening right here, right now. We rest in the 3 C's. We did not cause each other's struggles. We cannot cure them, and we cannot change anyone's path, but we can, with unconditional love, walk each other home. This year, we invite you to be more than a participant. We invite you to be a co-creator. While our structure is modeled after the Love, Serve, Remember guidelines, this is an open space for your direction and your voice. Everyone is invited to propose an idea for a future session or project. You're encouraged to seek the support of others here to implement your vision. Our community Zoom and YouTube account is open to you for meetings or creative endeavors. Ideas can be submitted directly to Jacqueline or shared openly in our sessions. Before we begin our reading from How Can I Help, let's hold space for the mystery of what we will create together this year. Let us engage with lightness, joy, and the brave honesty of the heart. As we prepare to leave each digital sanctuary, we offer our deepest gratitude to the co-creators and pioneers who continue to sustain this space. Your service is a living prayer. We dedicate the merit of this gathering to the journey of every soul present. As you return to your individual paths, remember that your greatest act of seva is the kindness you show yourself. May you continue your self seva with the same devotion you give to this group. We release the stories shared here into the vault of confidentiality. We leave the roles of helper and helped behind, returning to the simplicity of being. Go gently, knowing that you are never truly walking alone. Ram Ram. And to our foundational co-creators, there is a specific kind of bravery required to build a bridge that has never existed before. By combining the teachings of loving awareness with the principles of international peer support, you didn't just start a group, you initiated a shift in how our two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, questioning, intersexed, asexual, plus everyone else community experiences spirituality. We thank you for your vision, seeking the intersection where our identities and our souls meet, your courage, navigating the grist of organizational growth with a quiet mind, your self-seva, where every hour you spend in meditation and therapy or in nature, because that inner work is what makes the outer work possible. You have taught us that to love, serve, and remember is not a burden, but a joy when shared in mutuality. We honor your path and we celebrate your service, and we stand on the shoulders of your love. Hi, everybody. My name is Angus Wright. I also go by Angus by design, and this is my seva as a fellow explorer and a fellow student in the Love, Serve, Remember environment. So if you are interested, please visit ramdas.org for more information, or like, comment, share, reach out in some meaningful way, and we'll get you connected and stay connected. So I'm going to read from the Ram Dass and Paul Gorman, How Can I Help? Stories and Reflections on Service. And this is chapter 3, which is on suffering. My idea was pretty simple at the beginning. I started to volunteer in wards with terminally ill children to burn victims or burn victims. Just go in there to cheer them up a little, spread around some giggles. Gradually, it developed that I was going to come in as a clown. First, somebody gave me a red rubber nose, and I put that to work. Then I started doing some elementary makeup. Then I got a yellow, red, and green clown suit. Finally, some nifty, tremendous wingtip shoes about 2.5 feet long with green tips and heels, white in the middle. They came from a clown who was retiring and wanted his feet to keep on walking. It's a little tricky coming in. Some kids, when they see a clown, they think they're going to be eaten alive. And kids in hospitals and burn units, of course, are pretty shaky. So it's always good to lead with some bubbles. Just blow some bubbles around the ward. Then I'll move from bed to bed, just feeling out what's appropriate. Maybe checkers or blackjack or go fish. Or if they're lying there with tubes coming out of them, I'll hit the kids with riddles. Riddles are great. Later, if they can manage it, I'll give them this paper bag and they can fit over their heads. When they put it on and sort of blow their lips together, they can make this crazy sound I call the funny mantra. They turn it into a living kazoo. I'll say, if things get too tough, just take that paper bag from under your pillow and sound off. Maybe that'll help a little. And it'll sure surprise the nurses because things do get very tough in there. I'll tell you, they were very tough for me at the beginning. Very. You see, some pretty terrible things happen in these wards. Seeing children dying or mutilated is nothing most of us ever get prepared for. Nobody teaches us to face suffering in this society. We never talk about it until we hit it in the face, or till we get hit in the face. Like when I was starting out, I was making the rounds one day at a children's hospital. The shade was pulled on this one room, so I couldn't see. But I peeked in the door. It was a room with badly burned children in it. They had they had them in chrome crib beds with walls on the side. So they couldn't crawl out of there or fall out if it got too terrible in there. There was this one little black kid in one of them. He was horribly burnt. He looked like burnt toast. Pieces of his face weren't there. Pieces of his ears were missing. Where was his mouth? You could hardly tell who he was. There was no way of pinning a person to the face. What little there was of it. It was just terrible, just mind-boggling. My jaw dropped, I gasped, and I came completely unglued. I remember flashing back to the anti-war movement. There was a picture of a napalmed kid I used to carry around at demonstrations. Suddenly there was that kid right in front of me, unbelievably painful to behold. I was overwhelmed and my mind went off in all sorts of directions. What's it going to be like if he lives? What if I had a child this happened to? What if this happened to me? So there we were, burnt toast and unglued clown. Quite a sight, I bet. And I'm fighting just to stay there, trying to find a way to get past my horror. All of a sudden, this other little kid comes whizzing by. I think he was just skating along with his IV pole, and he stops and kind of pushes around me and looks into the crib at this other kid and comes out with, "Hey, you ugly!" Just like that. And the burnt kid made this gurgling laugh kind of noise and his face moved around. And all of a sudden, I just went for his eyes and we locked up right there and everything else just dissolved. And it was like going through a tunnel right to his heart. And all the burnt flesh disappeared. And I saw him from another place. We settled right in. You ugly, right? He ugly. He probably knows how ugly he is more than anyone else. And if he's got to deal with people hanging around with saliva coming out of their mouths, it's gonna be extra horrible. But if somebody just meets him in the eye and says, "Hey, what's happening? Want to hear a riddle?" So being able to look you ugly in the eye, that's done a lot for me because once I can do that, I can go on to see what might be done and that can ease things up and you get all kinds of inspiration. Like some of us were setting up to show Godzilla in the Kids Leukemia Award. I was making up kids as clowns. One kid was totally bald from chemotherapy. And when I finished doing his face, another kid said, "Go on and do the rest of his head." The kid loved the idea. And when I was done, his sister said, "Hey, can we show the movie on Billy's head?" And he really loved that idea. So we set up Godzilla and ran it on Billy's head. And Billy was pleased as punch. And we were all mighty proud of Billy. It was quite a moment, especially when the doctors arrived. So I don't know. Burnt skin or bald heads on little kids. What do you do? I guess you just face it. When the kids are really hurting so bad and so afraid and probably dying and everybody's heart is breaking. Face it and see what happens after that. See what to do next. I got the idea of traveling with popcorn. When a kid is crying, I dab up the tears with the popcorn and I pop it into my mouth or into his or hers. We sit there together and eat the tears. Suffering seems to be a fact of life. How do we face it? Clearly, it is a stranger to none of us. Perhaps we've experienced the corrosive pain of illness, persecution, starvation, or violence. We may not have lived with the deterioration and loss of a loved one. Few of us have seen the charred face of a burned child, but each of us has experienced our fair share of not getting what we want or having to deal with what we don't want. In this, we all know suffering. And the way in which we deal with suffering has much to do with the way in which we were able to be free of service to others. Of course, not all helping revolves around suffering. Much of what we offer may be in the nature of simple support or guidance, moving a friend's new furniture, teaching a child to read, but it is the affliction of others that most directly awakens in us the desire to be of care and comfort. The impulse to do all we can to relieve one another's pain is the automatic response of our native compassion. But the experience of suffering in ourselves and in others triggers off complicated reactions. To investigate these, is itself an act of compassion, an essential step towards becoming more effective instruments of mutual support and healing. How then do we respond to the pain we see around us? And once we have investigated this response, how do we respond to our own afflictions? At one level, we seem to have an attraction aversion relationship to human suffering. Sometimes our attraction seems to make or to take a neurotic form. It seems to trigger off an almost morbid fascination. We continually feed ourselves through newspapers, soap operas, tragedies, and gossip with images of suffering. It's as if our vicarious involvement with the trials and tribulations of others engages us in the life process in a way that we seem to need, but also want to be able to control. We want to touch it, but be able to turn it off at will. At another and deeper level, however, the suffering of others spontaneously awakens a response of instant empathy. You're right behind a man in the unemployment line. His eyes are red. You can tell he's been drinking. He finally gets his turn after waiting 3 hours, only to be told he's got to come back with the right papers. He's confused, but he nods. He doesn't want to make trouble, but he leaves the line. You can tell he didn't get it quite right, and he probably won't make it back the next week. He's headed for a bar, and it's 10:30 in the morning. Your closest friends, married for 20 years, are fighting bitterly right there in the restaurant, right there in front of you and their kids. You've never seen them act that way before. The marriage is falling apart. One daughter is staring at her soup. The other flashes you a look of panic. Your heart goes out to them, goes out to them all. The pain of others gives rise to the desire to help, to comfort, to touch, to say, I'm here. I'm here with you. I understand. But it's one thing to have one's heart engaged, quite another to have it overwhelmed or broken. Here lies our aversion to suffering. for when it gets too close and too strong, the terrible suffering of a parent, child, lover, best friend. We may experience the pain so excruciating that it can threaten the very fabric of our being, shatter our tenuously held faith, and cast us into deepest despair. Between the event of which we feel no personal connection and a tragedy that breaks our hearts, there is a vast range of affliction. In this domain, we make our choices. Shall I become involved or not? And if so, how deeply? How much human pain to let in and whose? Because the suffering around us is endless. The choices before us limitless. We must weigh them carefully, lest we have opened Pandora's box. Pain overwhelms us and jeopardize our fragile control of the universe around. This range is choice. This range of choices is recent and perhaps unique to our present culture, where people live their whole lives in close proximity. There's very little choice. Suffering involves all. The village's orphans are everybody's children, but affluence has brought us privacy and the apparent power to guard it against the encroachments of other people's adversity. As individuals and as a society, we set up lines of defense. We isolate poverty, old age, and death so that we need not confront them in our daily lives. The poor are often in ghettos, the elderly in retirement homes, and dying in terminal care wards. We pay to push suffering away. But privacy exacts its costs. How quickly, for example, it turns to loneliness and alienation. Our defense against one kind of suffering ironically turns out to have invited in another. We may somehow feel unsafe from the troubles in the world, but we also begin to feel dry, empty, and alone in our insulated havens. Gone is the mutuality and spontaneous support that arises naturally when lives are led in common. With doors closed to the pain of others, we banish that which would release our compassion and engagement with life. We need heart-to-heart resuscitation. Nor does the privacy actually end up buying us any final protection. Despite it, we're still interconnected with the peoples of the planet. While our isolation may give us some degree of temporary peace, there's little security in peace based on exclusion. As America has found out, the insistent goad of the world's suffering will ultimately force entry even into our well-protected castle. The pain and anger of those who are oppressed shape the challenges of our political life. If their suffering seems abstract, it is nonetheless ever present through the networks of communication, which extend our knowledge of human affliction to the outermost reaches of the planet. We can push it all away only so far. Because our privacy is finally unfulfilling and the pain of others ultimately can't be ignored, we find we must choose how much suffering we can let in and what to do with it once it's there. These choices are usually made in the midst of a mighty struggle between the head and the heart. The suffering of others spontaneously releases our desire to help out. Our heart begins to open, but then there's a thought. Is this problem too heavy? Do I have what it takes? If I offer to help, will I ever get away? Set off by fear, the mind is startled into self-defense. The fear, of course, is in part of a reaction to the suffering itself, but it is also a response of resistance to the heart's natural compassion as it reaches out to engage in someone's pain. Fear is the mind's reaction against the inherent generosity of the heart, because the heart knows no bounds it's giving. The mind feels called upon to define limits under such tension. Little wonder our choices of how to respond to people or respond to the pain of others seems so difficult. Perhaps we seek to resolve this tension without really having to open the door to suffering. A quick call to a sick friend, a charitable contribution slipped through the mail slot, some grain to a third world country. But do these measures really feed and satisfy the heart, our own and others? As usual, as they may be, they often shortchange our compassion. We know there's more to helping than this. Perhaps we open the door part way. We define boundaries of time and space for our involvement. A year off for the Peace Corps. Every Tuesday morning at the battered women's shelter. 8 hours a week with AIDS patients. We'll vote ourselves, but we won't go out to register others. I'll visit Aunt Rosie in the convalescent home, but I won't bring her back to my house. Our service takes place in the 50-minute hour. Careful boundaries assure that suffering won't spill over into the rest of our lives. These may be necessary. We all have other commitments. As often as not, however, they are artificially contrived to ward off that loss of control which so threatens and frightens the mind. But frequently these gestures fall short. Our boundaries prove to be uh, maginal lines. Suffering presses through. We retreat to our next line of defense. The mind itself and its array of tactics to protect its scrutiny in the face of pain. There is, for example, the early warning system of denial, which often comes into play almost automatically. We blot out the suffering right before our eyes. We walk down the street past beggars and people obviously in pain without even noticing them. An ambulance goes by. It's just a loud noise. It'll pass. We hear cries in the night. It's only a family feud. We'll turn over and go back to sleep. Potential nuclear annihilation is only 20 minutes away. We can't handle the thought of it. It's as if we have an invisible screen that deflects evidence of pain as it gets close enough. How easily we delete it from our awareness, even without being aware that we've done so. About suffering, they were never wrong. The old masters, how well they understood its human position, how it takes place, while something else is eating or opening a window or just walking dually along. W.H. Auden. When this early warning system fails, the mind must call on other devices in its repertory of response to suffer and the fear of it. A response to suffering and the fear of it. One tactic is so simple, we usually fail to notice it. We put some concept or idea between ourselves and the suffering. In comes Mary Jones hurting real bad. As she sits right across the desk, she suddenly becomes Mary Jones schizophrenic. With the flick of the mind, we've turned into the person into a problem. Or we try to stuff suffering into the facile spiritual or philosophical perspective. It's just the way of things. Suffering is part of the grand plan. It's their karma. Suffering is grace. A party line, glib and heartless. Sometimes we even use the fact of human suffering to justify abstract ideologies. We use it to prove points. I broke with a certain circle of anti-war friends, best friends, when dead lives became souvenirs. Some young Americans were invited to Czechoslovakia to meet representatives of the Viet Cong, the NLF. At the end, they were given rings of friendship. They were made of steel from shot down American planes. So maybe to some that meant swords into plowshares, but for most, those rings were status symbols, radical macho. They got passed out very selectively. I didn't hear any talk about the pilots whose planes and their families. It sounds extreme, but the same thing happened with the slaughter at Maillet and television images of our soldiers burning village huts. Some people were more glad to see those images than they were pained at the death of the innocent civilians. You could really see that. Anti-war people, all these. The greatest sin of the age, wrote the Russian philosopher Nicholas Berdyaev, is to make the is to make the concrete abstract. That's what the mind is trying to do through all these devices and through efforts to explain things away. Someone falls, and our attention turns quickly from the person to the slippery streets. They really should do something about that. Frequently, these devices have the stink of self-righteousness about them, banishing the suffering from our awareness and making us feel good about ourselves at the same time. If she wasn't a drunkard, she wouldn't have come up that way. Well, they always cut school, no matter what, they can't find a job. If those people in India didn't spend so much time meditating, they'd have their economic scene together, and there wouldn't be so much starvation. Pity is another way to keep suffering at arm's length. We may be in a little of someone's pain, but never enough to threaten our own self-control. We may feel a little moved to respond to the suffering. We'd feel guilty or uncomfortable if we didn't, but we'd like to get it all over with as soon as possible and get on with our own affairs. Compassion and pity are very different, whereas compassion reflects the yearning of the heart to merge and take on some of the suffering. Pity is a controlled set of thoughts designed to offer separateness. Compassion is the spontaneous love, pity, and the involuntary reflex of fear. When you're blind, you hear very well. The tone of someone's voice is their face. It never lies. And I'll hear the difference between someone just caring for me and someone protecting themselves. Like they want to be concerned. They don't want to get up and leave, but their mind is elsewhere. And what I hear is their fear and guilt, even in the middle of their concern. It's such a mixed signal. Perhaps the strategy for dealing with suffering most familiar in our helping institutions is that of professional warmth. Like pity, it's a stance to keep our distance. Like many professionals, even believe it's appropriate not to get involved. They demonstrate a cool uh, efficiency and interpersonal friendliness, at best a facade, and at worst hypocrisy. They become like their machines, cool green, giving off a competent hum. It's a way of plasticizing human relationships to keep them sterile, free of contact germs. Of course, it's understandable how this state of affairs has evolved. The demands on helping professionals to confront so much suffering each day are immense. Professional warmth is a survival strategy, but it's no answer. Our hearts pay the price, helpers and helped alike. Fortunately, awareness of this problem is growing. The question of suffering and its relation to organic illness has rarely been addressed in the medical literature. Reported the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine in a special article devoted to this issue. But what does it say about our habits that this concern has been such a long time coming? Frequently, our reactiveness to suffering takes the form of having instantly to do something, do anything. It's we gotta syndrome. We gotta fix this up right away. We gotta call this person for advice. It's tricky because this impulse may arise from genuine empathy, but the form of action is compulsive. Often, what's happening is we gotta get rid of someone else's pain because it's hurting us too much. Its true neurotic dimension is most evident when there's really nothing to do, yet we still must talk to that nurse, question that doctor, call that specialist, rearrange the furniture, change the TV channel, straighten the bed for the fifth time in the last 20 minutes. And are you sure you're all right, dear? Really? I mean, really? Rushing about this reactive and zealous urgency infects the situation with a toxic tension that is the last kind of mental state anyone whose suffering needs. This agitation perpetuates itself and compounds suffering. It's Typhoid Mary disguised as Florence Nightingale. In helpless in a helpless layperson, such behavior can be flamboyant. It's a helping professional. It's often more subtle. Denial, abstraction, pity, professional warmth, compulsive hyperactivity, these are a few of the ways in which the mind reacts to suffering and attempts to restrict or direct the natural compassion of the heart. This tension between head and heart leaves us tentative and confused. As we reach out, then pull back, love and fear are pitted against one another. As hard as this is for us, what must it be like for those who need our help? Being a long-term patient gives you a unique perspective on the world, and I have to laugh. Almost sometimes, I must say, it's a little bittersweet. Naturally, I'm seen as helpless. They have to lift me, move me, deal with my bowels and all. I don't look very nice or smell very nice, I suppose. What I often see coming in the room is what you might call central casting for General Hospital. Here comes Miss, aren't you looking better today? Which is funny to me since it's pretty clear I'm only barely holding my own. Enter stage left and we have Nurse Wince. It's hard for her to look at me. She's afraid for her own mother that she'll end up like me. The doctors stride in. They should play pomp and circumstance over the PA system regularly. They're examining my case. They find my case interesting. My visitors, they usually fall into a soap opera too. And so do I suppose. On it goes. You'd be surprised at the number of people who talk to you and can't look you in the eye, even more than we normally can't look at each other in the eye. It's like a parade of attitudes in here. It's funny, I laugh, I understand, I really do. I'm not a pretty picture. Their work is hard, but sometimes I just want to cry out, hello, is there anybody there? Hello? Hello? How can we answer back, and in what way, and in a way that our answers are heard and welcomed? How, in other words, can we engage suffering and stay open to the expression of our natural compassion? First, perhaps we can start out by just asking these questions of ourselves. They frame the situation in such a way that we can once again open ourselves to a new possibility of response to suffering. They can turn our attention to an examination of the reactions that suffering triggers in all of us. Up to now, these reactions have been rooted not only in fear, but in the denial of fear. Merely to be mindful of this pattern is to be one step closer to our own truth and, in turn, to the truth of someone else's suffering. Truth is where we will meet, simply acknowledging our reactiveness to pain. Therefore, it is itself an initial act of service. As I walk into the sanatorium, I have a little exercise. I know that I am to be presented with evidence of terrible pain. It's all right there, right in front of me. And I know that it's probably going to blow me away the minute I go in, no matter what. No matter that I've worked there 6 years, so I'll take note of all that as if it were a sign on the front door. It gives me a certain amount of sobriety, preparation for entering. In doing that, I find I get a feeling of deep respect for those inside who are suffering from the kinds of pains they're dealing with. Basic respect for their dignity and their worth. They're here. They're equally as human as I am, and their suffering calls my attention to that fact. Sometimes I also find myself honoring them, not just respect, but honoring them for what they are and what they're enduring. I'll try to bring that feeling in the door with me. This gives me strength, and it starts simply from taking account of what's going on in me in the sanatorium, in those inside it. Our tendency when we acknowledge qualities in ourselves like fear of suffering or loss of control may be to judge ourselves. Found selfish, uncaring, impatient, unworthy, we're embarrassed and uncomfortable at the recognition of our weakness. We have not taken to heart the example of the biblical Paul, who said, "My strength is made perfect through weakness." Yet this often turns out to be the case in our efforts to care for others. Acknowledging our weakness can soften our defensiveness. We're not so busy protecting ourselves all the time. We're much more likely to be there for anyone who is wrestling with his or her own sense of weakness, unworthiness, or fear. We'll hear each other. To acknowledge our humanness with a mixture of empathy and fear strengthens our helping hand. But we must do so with compassion for ourselves and supportive appreciation for our own predicament. Such compassion can come forth more easily when we appreciate that it's the openness of the heart, after all, with which this all began. One fear is awakened not just by the suffering, but by the intensity of our heart's reaction to it. The ego may have been frightened into all kinds of defense mechanisms to control our innate generosity, but mercy and kindness were our first impulses. Natural compassion was our starting point. This compassionate self-acknowledgement may start out with a simple reflection. I'm really uncomfortable when I visit Uncle Harry because he's suffering so much. I want to help him, but there doesn't seem to be anything I can do. I see how phony I can get when I'm around him, and that's okay, but it's more than okay. This is an act of acknowledgement begins to go to work for us. The phoniness usually starts to fall away the minute it's owned up to. Discomfort in the presence of suffering is usually less toxic and infectious when it's no longer denied. This quality of unjudging awareness not only frees us and others from the consequences of our reactivity, it allows us to enter more consciously into the experience of suffering itself. We're no longer running away, glancing over our shoulder. We can stop and face what's right before us. We can look at what is. But we must be quiet to do so, quiet to hear. Yet the first thing we notice when we try is that we're not quiet at all. We're a torrent of reactions and reactions to reactions, one piling in upon the other. Such agitation is hardly the best ground for which to observe the subtleties of any situation. It would be so much easier if we weren't in the presence of all that suffering. But then again, wasn't it the suffering and our reactions to it that we set out to observe in the first place? So we have to find tranquility even in the midst of trauma. What's required is to cultivate a dispassionate witness within. This witness, as it grows stronger, can see precisely how we jump the gun in the presence of pain. It notices how our reactions might be perpetuating denial or fear or tension in the situation, and very qualities we'd like to help alleviate. The witness catches us in the act, but gently without reproach. So we can simply acknowledge our reactivity and begin to let it fall away, allowing our natural compassion to come more into play. The witness gives us a little room. Not only does it notice our own reactivity, but it brings into the light of awareness the actions and reactions of other parties in a situation. Now we can begin, perhaps for the first time, to hear them. Less busy pushing away suffering, less frenzied having to do something about it. We're able to get a sense of what they're feeling, of what they feel they need. We may be startled to discover that they've been asking for all along is entirely different from what we've been so busy offering. All I want is for you to sit down here next to me. I don't care about the nurse. The IV is working fine. The bed is comfortable. Just sit with me. Quieter now. We can recognize such a need often without it having to be expressed, perhaps even more before it's consciously felt. We'll just come into the room and sit down and say, hello. This process of witnessing is dispassionate. It's not committed to one result or another. It's open to everything because it has, so to speak, no axe to grind. It is more able to see truth. As the Tao Te Ching says, the truth waits for eyes unclouded by longing. The witness, however, is not passive, complacent, or indifferent. Indeed, while it's not attached to the particular outcome, its presence turns out to bring about change. As we bring what is into the light of clear awareness, we begin to see that the universe is providing us with an abundant clues as to the nature of the suffering before us. What is being asked, what fears have been inviting us, inhibiting us, and really what might really help. All we have to do is listen, really listen. Such investigation and inquiry into what infuses a situation with a quality of freshness and possibility. As we see how reactive we've been, we find ourselves opening to a new response or to new responses. It was our own reactivity, unacknowledged, that cut off the spontaneity of our helping heart. Once it's acknowledged, however, and once we've begun to work with it, a whole new level of creativity becomes possible. I used to have to walk through it automatically. You don't bother to look. You certainly don't let much of it in. But it was the children themselves who began to open me up. Once it started, it began to pull me gradually but steadily. It was very powerful, but you have to take it at your own pace. Because here in a neonatal intensive care unit, you see incredible beauty and unbearable pain, and you have to figure out how to be with both. The children are beautiful because you just get to know them. You can't nurse them, really nurse them, without knowing them. And you can't know them, really know them, without seeing their beauty. What can be more beautiful than innocence? And that affects all of their features. Their their tininess, the eyes, the fingers, the sound of their hearts, just their breath can move you in with its beauty. Part of it seems to come from how fragile they are, how uncertain it is how long they'll be here. The cliche metaphor of the flower that blooms for a day, it's like a garden of that here. The picture on the surface, though, is also terribly grim. A room full of those with little ones, many of whom are right on the edge of life and death, and some of whose faces and movements are pretty distressing. And then their parents there on the other side of the window, with the most desperate and stricken faces looking in so helplessly. Such pain. It's something to be inside a picture that is being looked at with such expressions. But you look back just to let them know someone's in here. It was the use of machines and extraordinary medical measures that moved several of us to see how much distance we were putting between ourselves and the infants. Even if the machines weren't there, though, there was that tendency to keep it impersonal, to keep your distance. And you knew that wasn't any good for the children least of all. So a group of us began to talk about it, to open up our feelings, to decide to be with the children more. And when it got too hard and we'd break down, we'd support each other and talk it over. The more we opened up, it just became natural that we began this new practice of holding infants when the time would come for them to die. It wasn't a decision as much as something we'd become ready to do. So at the end, we'd take them off the monitors and into the arms in a rocker. And we'd sit with them in their final moments. It tears you apart because holding them, sometimes you can feel them go, and the death itself is different. On the machines, it's monitored as brain death. In your arms, it's the heart and the breath. It's so, what's the word, poignant. You feel 10 dozen things all at once. Terrible sadness because you become attached to the child. But glad too because their suffering is about to end. Maybe anger at the world, at God, at whatever for allowing this to happen. And such empathy for parents. And sometimes like awe and wonder. Like there must be some kind of explanation for all this which you don't yet understand. But patience too. That things become more clear in time. And peace of mind because you're doing the best you can. And humble to be present at such a moment. All of the above, often all at once. You're sitting with these feelings as well as sitting there with the child. In fact, you come to see that you're sitting with all of it on behalf of the child. You're doing it for yourself, simply to stay cool. But it's a final act for them as well. You're offering what peace you've come to, and it creates such intimacy, impossible to describe. And you're so right with them. It's unbearable and beautiful at the same time. How do you explain that? It's just the part of you that is with them is getting ripped up. But the part of you that's like trying to understand it all, well, that's beautiful because you see that we can all be in the presence of great pain, but still appreciate life even in the last moments, especially then. Compassion follows lawfully, so we open the experience of suffering. Simply to observe and to allow and to open allows us to hear what is natural, harmonious, and appropriate. Instead of closed minds and mechanical reactions, there is open space and inventiveness. There is the helping of living truth. So the activity of of the quiet witness, not only shows us how fearfully reactive we have been to the suffering of others, it also releases within us a yearning to grow in our capacity to care for others. We look anew at how each situation can teach us, how it can help us evolve in our ability to confront and to help alleviate suffering. We can be students working on ourselves to become more effective instruments of compassion. The collaboration of the witness and this yearning to grow, born of the inherent mercy of the heart, continues to bring light patterns of response to suffering that we hadn't noticed before. From situation to situation, we see these reactions repeated again and again. Sometimes they are appropriate. Very often they are unconscious. Instead of being responsive to an actual situation as it is, we come in with our reactions pre-taped, just looking for ways to protect them. We may assume people are suffering in ways that they aren't. Poor baby. This must be awful for you. Are you sure you don't want me to call someone? Take something for the pain. We wince when someone else gets an injection. We project discomfort onto people about their helplessness, which doesn't necessarily exist, or we fail to see the character of the suffering that is really there. As we begin to notice these tendencies in ourselves, we can look further and see where they come from, how we've built them up from our up out of past experience. Certainly, some have come to from how we've dealt previously with all the pain of others. But more significant still are our past experiences facing our own suffering. Here is the next critical issue we need to engage, one that any of us who seek to help another must confront sooner or later. My first visit to India included a stop at Benares, in the streets where there were hundreds, perhaps thousands of people with begging bowls who were in the final stages of one illness or another and seemed to be just waiting to die. My heart was deeply pained by the scene. I put lots of change in lots of begging bowls, but even then, it didn't seem like enough. In encounters with these people, I usually averted my eyes from meeting theirs. I guess I felt guilty that I had so much and they had so little. Finally, I was remaining in the hotel rather than face such massive suffering. By the time uh, of my next visit to the city, many months later, I had become familiar with the Hindu culture. I now realize that Benares was one of the most sacred cities in India, situated on the banks of the Ganges and most sacred river. I also had come to know that in this culture, which believed so deeply in reincarnation, the most auspicious place to die was in Benares. To be cremated there on the riverbank assured liberation after death. Now, as I placed coins in begging bowls, I was able to look into the eyes of the people, and to my profound amazement, I found in their eyes not the suffering that I had been reticent to face, but the looks of peace. In fact, I even saw in some of their eyes pity for me, lost that I was in an illusion. Leprosy, leukemia, blindness, such poverty, and they had only a loincloth and begging bowl, and still peace. How wrong I'd been to assume that they were suffering, and I would have been suffering in a similar situation. Pause there. The link between our own pain and the quality of our empathy for that of others needs to be examined carefully. The more we understand it, the deeper, freer, more naturally compassionate our response to the pain we all experience at one time or another. What causes suffering for us in the first place? An unpleasant sensation or situation arises. It could be physical pain, psychological distress, general uncertainty about the future, and so forth. These are potential conditions for suffering. But taken alone, these are not the suffering itself. How we react to them determines how much we will suffer. These reactions can vary. A child and an adult each stub a toe. They both experience pain. The adult has a worldview in which such sensation is recognized and incorporated. It's one of those things, it'll pass. So the adult experiences the sensation of pain, but does not really suffer beyond that. Because there's no uncontrolled reactive resistance to speak of, the adult need to initiate no action to alleviate the suffering. For the child, the experience is quite different. Lacking a context that readily allows for stubbed toes, the child identifies with the unpleasant pain and experiences aversion to it. The child puts itself strongly at odds with what is. This resistance to the unpleasant situation is the root of suffering. Tears may continue after the sensation has subsided. As a reaction, the child runs to the parent for solace. Two people have not eaten in 3 days. One is a yogi doing a purification fast. Though there are unpleasant sensations in the stomach, there is very little aversion, perhaps even none. Hence, little or no real suffering. The yogi sits quietly and takes no steps to change the state of affairs. Another person, however, lives on the street, has no job, no food stamps, and hasn't eaten in 3 days. The unpleasant sensations are painful, and their causes add them a strong element of suffering, frustration, anger, humiliation. He's suffering. He goes out begging. Two women are in labor. They're both screaming as a natural response to pain. For one of them, the pain represents the heralding of the long awaited child and is part of the incredible mystery of life. The pain draws her in and fills her not with suffering, but with ecstasy. She has never felt so alive and in such deep harmony with her nature. She rejects a painkiller solicitously offered by the midwife. For the other woman, the pain of childbirth is what she's been afraid of since the onset of pregnancy. When it arises, she is unable to push it away. It becomes a source of suffering, not part of an experience of overall joy. She welcomes the pain medication. How dramatic then the range of potential reactions among us to unpleasant circumstances, whatever their form. Down with a cold, it is it a fearful intimidation of morality or a chance just to let go for a few days? Newly divorced, do you feel rejected or acknowledge the opportunity to be free of accumulated dependencies? Just fired from work? Are you worthless or free to discover new skills? Obviously, certain circumstances or sensations are more likely to trigger off greater suffering than others, but suffering can exist even without immediate or proximate cause. We experience it frequently in this general floating form. We simply want things to be other than they are. What we have isn't quite enough. Who we are isn't quite satisfactory. How we feel could always be a little better. That which is just isn't right. In the face of unpleasant circumstance or experience, then, it is often the context, framework, or disposition of the mind that determines the extent of which there is suffering. We hear stories of great tribulation. A man in great pain with advanced cancer is now denied the strength he always had as a professional carpenter. A supportive husband, a father of four, a teenager is hurt in an automobile crash and has lost the use of both legs. A woman is told she can never have children. She's become alcoholic. So they've just fired her from her job. We can easily feel in ourselves the likely reactions such people must experience under such conditions. My God, I can't believe this is happening to me. I'm so totally unprepared. I'll never be the same. My life's a failure. Everywhere I look now, I only see reason for despair. I just plain feel sorry for myself, that's all. I feel trapped in this useless body. Helpless, utterly helpless. I want to scream and I can't. What did I do to deserve this? I'll never make it through another day. I don't want to hear about anybody else's problems. Everyone is a stranger. I feel totally alone. I keep expecting to wake up and be healed. And why me? Our hearts go out to these people, not only because of the immediate circumstances, but because intuitively we recognize the response of mental suffering that we ourselves would experience under such conditions. Their predicaments awakens our own fears and of pain or loss or control. It's so easy to empathize with their reactions of resistance. But it also must be said that other people respond to such trying circumstances differently. While this may happen as a result of remarkable personal growth, forged by the crucible of affliction, we can hear in their responses the possibility that extreme pain need not always be intimately associated with extreme suffering. It stinks, it's terrible, but it is what it is. And I'm going to go on living with it forever, or living with it for however long I have. When your negligence has resulted in someone's death, I can't describe the amount of guilt you feel. And then a moment comes when you move from utter humiliation to simple humility. It's your fault, but also somehow it isn't. We live lives where such things happen. And in that moment, you begin to forgive yourself. You don't deny what you've done. You pass through it, it rips you up, and you come out the other end with a new possibility that comes from that humility and self forgiveness. As long as I was pushing away this pain, it had me nailed to the wall. But then I stopped resisting it. I sort of let it in. It was actually a relief. I felt better in spite of it, no longer at odds with everything. When my daughter was murdered, I felt unbearable anguish. I couldn't sleep, eat, anything. And then a friend and I prayed together. At one moment, I felt God's mercy. Even though I couldn't understand this crazy mess, I had a sense that there was something behind it all that made it meaningful. After that, the hurt didn't go away, but it was bearable. We hear in these testimonies something else which we can empathize. The possibility of coming up for air, even in the midst of the most painful, even agonizing conditions. Somehow we sense that we could be with pain in some way so as not to be suffering so much. Just as we have known in ourselves the fear and resistance, so we have also had these moments when we have experienced pain yet transcended suffering. Just the possibility that such pain need not automatically cause continuous suffering is profoundly important. This possibility, in fact, was the foundation stone of the teachings of the Buddha. He saw that if we could break that link between painful connections and the reactiveness of mind, there was hope of liberating ourselves from the continuous experience of suffering. He realized that pain alone is not the enemy. The real enemy is fear and resistance. It's not difficult to recognize how deep are the ways of our mind has been conditioned to deal with unpleasant situations by resisting them. Throughout our whole lives, we have been encouraged to do anything we can to escape from rather than to explore and investigate unpleasantness. Our society consumes literally tons of aspirin daily. It's not just the physical pain we try to avoid, but all kinds of unpleasant conditions, boredom, restlessness, self-doubt, anger, loneliness, loss, feelings of unworthiness. In our culture, we do all we can to push these experiences aside or keep them at a distance. We choose to be entertained. So it gets to the point that the slightest unpleasantness elicits our push against it. We tense in opposition. As unpleasantness gets stronger, the opposition becomes more formidable. Our hearts are closed down by the fear in our minds, fear of the loss of control, being overwhelmed, ultimately of extinction. Our muscles tighten, our energies become knotted and blocked, And of course, if suddenly we are hit by enormous affliction and adversity, we've no habits except resistance. Under these conditions, to suggest that we turn around and look at what so frightens us, to open a dialogue with the enemy rather than just piling up on the sandbags and amassing arsenals, is asking us to go in the face of all of our conditioning. It is asking us to walk in intentionally to the edge of unexplored territory, to relate to the unknown. No small task. Imagine yourself in a state of pain. You particularly fear, really fear, being asked to explore it, investigate it, even somehow make friends with it. Just the thought of it can awaken the dread that reveals the potential enormity of our opposition. Yet many have found that it is possible at least to begin such a process, to face the pain, not defiantly, but gently, with close attention and the compassion for ourselves. Perhaps we've gone through a divorce and felt the terrible sting of rejection. We've lost a partner to death and felt a sudden onslaught of grief. We've experienced periods of deep self-doubt or feelings of unworthiness. We've just felt deeply depressed by a sense of great separateness from others, cut off, alone, barely touching when we do meet. While we'd just as soon deny our pain because it's too searing, at a certain point we've turned to face it and explore what it is that we're really feeling. This is the beginning of constructive work. We cease resisting and begin to open. In that action, we introduce some space into the situation, the space between the pain and our suffering reaction. In that awareness, we see that what we imagined to be unbearable is potentially bearable. There are alternative responses to pain rather than resistant reactivity. There are ways to cultivate this space systematically. Certain meditations for opening around pain, whether physical or psychological, assist us in this effort. An example of one of these might help make this process more vivid. Opening to pain. Find a position in which you can remain comfortable and quiet for a few minutes. Bring into your awareness a thought or a bodily sensation that is unpleasant to you. Perhaps it may be an image or memory of physical pain or ache. Choose only one. Let your attention settle around this thought or sensation. Allow yourself to be with the discomfort. Bring your attention even more intimately to bear on the thought or sensation. Feel the way in which your mind or body tends to push against the unpleasantness to close it off. Feel in your mind or in your body both the pain and the resistance against the pain, both present yet separate from one another. Notice your tendency to want to identify with the resistance and to deny or isolate or push away the pain. But instead of reactively pushing the pain, the painful thought or sensation away, stay with it gently but firmly. Now starting to loosen the ring of resistance that surrounds the painful thought or sensation, loosening its hold in the same way you might allow a fist to open. Consider the possibility that the resistance to the pain may be more painful than the pain itself. Notice how the resistance closes around your heart and fills your body and mind with tension and disease. Keep relaxing the resistance, the tightness that have accumulated around the pain. Notice any fear that is developed around this unpleasant thought or sensation. Allow the fear to melt, to dissolve, along with the resistance, softening, opening, releasing. Let the painful thought or sensation float free, no longer held in the grasp of resistance. Keep letting go of any resistance that tries to smother the experience. Allow the unpleasant thoughts or sensations to come fully into consciousness. No holding, no pushing away, just floating free. All grasping relinquish just the thought or sensation that the awareness of it together, moment to moment. See that unpleasant thought is just a thought. The painful sensation is just a sensation. Just that, nothing more. Softening, opening, releasing, allowing, again and again, until there's just thought, just sensation. And it keeps changing from moment to moment. It always keeps changing. Soft, open, gentle, allowing, and floating free. Adapted from Who Dies by Stephen Levine. Whether the pain is physical or psychological, the fist that is tightened around it can loosen. As we have been conditioned, so we can be deconditioned, so we can discover the possibility of freedom. As we play the edge of our pain, gently opening, acknowledging, and allowing the suffering it has caused diminishes. If we further dissolve the boundaries, letting ourselves into the pain and the pain enter into us, we can see the possibility of going beyond it to where the heart is freer. We've never been so vulnerable, so defenseless, and yet somehow so safe. The surrender we were so frightened of turns out to be not defeat, but a kind of victory, or at the very least, an opening. We should never underestimate the difficulty of this process at any time, under any circumstances. It is nothing to hurl at one another. Open to your pain, as if it didn't require great patience and discipline, a willingness to fail, fall, and try once more. The practice is not heartless, not rooted in any kind of denial of what's entailed. It is a practice of compassion for ourselves. The very same attentive listening and patient open-heartedness we would gently offer another. Opening to our pain, exploring the roots of our suffering, at best with guidance or support, can always increase our opportunity for well-being. But this process also can be of immeasurable value in our efforts to be of service to others. As our understanding of our own suffering deepens, we become available at deeper levels to those we would care for. We are less likely to project suffering that does not exist or deny that which does. We're much more sensitive and alert to the nuances of human pain. We do not, however, insist that others go to the edge of their own pain. Under no circumstances do we judge or condemn another's suffering. We merely continue to work on our own steadily, continuously, in all areas of our own life. Opening to adversity and discovering it in it all the places where we are clinging, resisting, and denying. We gradually cut the cord between the pain and suffering. The pain is there, but we can move beyond the suffering to the extent we ourselves are free of suffering. Our very being becomes an environment in which others can be free of theirs. If it is in the way of things. It is in just this manner that the great spiritual teachers have perennially been of help to mankind, to humankind. The power of their compassion has been rooted in the fact that they themselves have overcome the entrapments of suffering. They have broken the link between painful circumstance and mental resistance. They have gone beyond it. This doesn't mean that they have denied the experience of pain. In Gethsemane, on the cross, throughout his life, Christ surely felt and understood the burden of human incarnation. In his humanity, he experienced it. But in this divinity, he transcended it and transformed it into redemption and liberation, a possibility for all. So too the Buddha, having seen what he saw, could look across the fields of human experience and existence with the smile of unbearable compassion. We can feel the same quality of compassion, which combines fully experiencing but also transcending suffering. In the story of the great Tibetan teacher, Marpa, who lived on a farm with his family but welcomed many seekers and monks who came to him for instruction and wisdom. One day, Marpa's eldest son was killed, off by himself, alone with his grief. Marpa wept. One of his students approached him and said, "I don't understand. You teach all this is an illusion created by the clinging and desire and resistance. Yet here you are weeping. If all of this is an illusion, why do you grieve so deeply?" Marpa replied, "Yes, everything here is an illusion, and the death of a child is the greatest of these illusions." For us, then, investigation of all the causes of suffering within is a tool. Here is our work. Here is the path. We conduct the journey according to our own individual temperament and intuition. No one can force us to do this. It's ours to undertake or not as appropriate. But it can be of equal value in the moments when we are helping others and those in which we ourselves are seeking or receiving care. At times, we will be able to break the conditioning of mind and let go of the suffering. At other times, until our self-investigative practice is highly developed, we are bound to get lost in resistance to pain. So we work to understand suffering itself, not just the conditions which give rise to it, but to the nature of our various reactions. to it as well. The range turns out to be vast. Some of us become obsessed by our suffering. Others try to ignore it. Some curl up in the fetal position and withdraw into themselves. Others wander about confused, grabbing at straws in the wind. Some keep businesslike, others childishly irresponsible. Some keep a stiff upper lip, others cry and turn to jelly. Habitual reactions also include the way we respond to help from others. When in pain, we may reach for help swiftly or spurn any aid. We may be embarrassed at discovering our need or assume it is our right to demand help aggressively. We may feel that we've been wronged or are being punished by suffering and become angry and play martyr, or we may be softened by the pain and receive support graciously. For one receiving help, it can be immensely useful to become more conscious of the habitual ways in which we react to our suffering and help offered to alleviate it. Just seeing these patterns clearly may allow us to discard reactions that cut us off from others at a time when we need them the most. For one who is seeking to help or to offer help, investigation of our habitual reactions to own suffering can illuminate the subtle ways in which we may judge others for theirs. Many helpers, when they themselves are suffering, are incapable of accepting support or at least receiving it easily. Yet they may be impatient with those they're working with for not accepting aid or counsel readily enough. Chances are, if you can't accept help, you can't really give it. While all this is an extremely complicated psychodynamic interaction, one thing seems obvious. The more conscious we are in dealing with our own suffering, the more sensitive we will be in treating the pain of others. I have a friend, a chemotherapy nurse in a children's cancer ward, whose job it is to pry for any available vein uh, in an often emaciated arm to give infusions of chemicals that sometimes last as long as 12 hours and which are often quite discomforting to the child. He is probably the greatest pain giver the children meet in their stay in the hospital because he's worked so much with his own pain. His heart is very open. He works with this responsibilities in the hospital as a laying on of hands with love and acceptance. There is little in him that causes him to withdraw, that reinforces the painfulness of the experience for the children. He is a warm, open space which encourages them to trust whatever they feel. And it is he whom the children most often ask for at the time they are dying. Although he is the main pain giver, he is also the main love giver. What objectives can we set? What resources can we call upon then in the great effort to relieve suffering? First, we must face it and let it in. Different orders of service and loving kindness follow. Our immediate responsibility is to do what we can to alleviate the concrete conditions of human affliction. We work to provide food for the hungry, shelter for the homeless, health care for the sick and the feeble, protection for the threatened and vulnerable, schooling for the uneducated, freedom for the oppressed. To this order of service, we must always attend first. Where we cannot help provide such aid, we may be called on to offer a different kind of support. Perhaps we can help another to re-perceive his or her situation that while it is unpleasant or painful, he or she need suffer less as a reaction to it. This can't take on the form of facile counsel. Such support can come only from the truth of our own being. However, much of what we've been able to break our own reactiveness to pain, however well we have cultivated those qualities of mind and heart that allow us to be open to affliction, yet not be reactive to it. We will have that to offer others. The right form, the right words, the right moment will all follow. At this stage, we do not have help to give. We are help itself. Even in those situations where another person is completely unenmeshed in the web of suffering mind and is not receptive to help in reperceiving the situation, we can be of comfort. We can offer our own empathy, our own experience, our own understanding of how it feels when we suffer. The resistance, tension, fear, withdrawal, self-pity, doubt, the utter separateness, this compassion will guide our helping hand to appropriate gestures. A simple word of friendship to cut through the isolation, a gentle neck massage to ease the tension, a tender hug or touch to convey love, meeting of the eyes for a moment beyond it all. Sometimes we may be able to do all these things at once, nourish the hungry stomach, the famished heart, and the yearning soul. But perhaps there will be nothing we can do. Then we can only be and be with the person in his or her pain, attending to the quality of our own consciousness. On his or her behalf, we will dwell in whatever truth and understanding we have come to, which is beyond suffering. From this, compassion arises. Hearts that have been known pain meet in mutual recognition and trust. Such a meeting helps immeasurably. When I left New York Harbor for Peru, I instinctively felt I was making a journey that would shape my life. It was 1951. I was robust and eager. I wasn't even sure what my real mission would be. At that point, there was just an empty lot. It was 13,500 feet high, very cold and demanding. As a Maryknoll sister, I was there to teach school. After a while, I became principal. I guess you could say I was a figure just by being in that role. Then the illness happened quite suddenly up there. The doctors said it was rheumatoid arthritis. They said it was ultimately a crippling disease. They said there was nothing really to do about it. I went on to see other doctors elsewhere, like in Panama, because I wanted to stay in South America. I wouldn't accept what they were telling me, that what I was going to have to face. But it gradually became clear I should have come back to the States for some treatment. I got good care. However, the doctor said that the gold injections would be the only help, but it would prevent me from going back to Peru. I didn't want them. I was going back. I was fighting it all. The illness, my own reaction, self-pity, anger, discouragement, doubt. I wouldn't give in. But every day it seemed I was losing. Finally, I felt like I had to quit imposing my own will, and that was a big step. I went to the doctors and they said they could give me this medicine, and after a few months, they'd see if I could get onto maintenance and go back to Peru. After all my anger and resistance, there seemed to be some kind of chance. But chance for what? I had surgery at the Mayo Clinic and I did a great deal of reflecting and praying in their chapel. There was a beautiful wooden statue of Christ there with outstretched hands. I think that's why it had been chosen to inspire the hands of surgeons and nurses. As it happened, I was there to have my own hands operated on. I remember thinking that even though my hands were going to be broken and crooked, they would still be sacred to me. I'd use them to bring something to somebody. I didn't know what. My hands could be the compassionate hands of Christ as much as the hands of the doctors and nurses. So I sought to be able to enter into the world of the sick and to live with the mystery of suffering. I saw that I had to enter my own experience of pain and to face up to it and then to allow myself to be changed by it. Without that, nothing could be done. I saw that healing came with owning our wounds as a first step in moving beyond them. I returned to Peru at a lower altitude. Almost everything had changed, especially my attitude towards other people I was working with. I could feel their terrible poverty and pain in a whole new way. In fact, it seemed as if I was seeing it for the first time. How often I'd rushed around trying to solve people's problems without really seeing them. The pain in their faces, the insecure eyes, the nervous hands, the expressions of the hurt inside. It was only when suffering had actually touched me that I began to feel their condition. The affirmation that I got from them was so important. You're the same person you were before. And even if you can't teach or do anything, we'd like you to stay. Just to see me get up and try to do something uh, seemed to mean a great deal to them. We were meeting on a level where we all suffer. That became our ground. And so my ministry changed. It became the ministry of walking together. Some of us with physical disabilities joined together to share our experience. We were just being together, trying to understand what was possible for us, share what we could, examples of creativity. Our pain and weakness and deformity proved to be the teachers of a great mystery, a small introduction into the kind of dying from which new spirit is born. We found we had become more sensitive to others, more touched, more able to listen. We moved more by feelings than by actual intellectual concepts. We discovered that the more we opened to the pain of others, the more we found ourselves in their service. Having been brought low, it was just a matter of standing humbly before others and presenting a visible sign of hope by some silent testimony. So we would simply walk about as best we could. Many of the Peruvians we ran into with handicaps were deeply ashamed and hid. We would come to see them and they would hide in their own homes. But as we moved about, they would gradually just come forth more. I think of Juan, a polio victim at 3 who had been hidden by his family in their small mud brick house until we discovered him at the age of 8. His brother Julio took us home one day. There was Juan, his twisted legs underneath him, scooting around the small dirt patio on a circular piece of rubber. His mother was suspicious and didn't want us to stay. A handicapped child meant she was being punished for something. She was ashamed. We returned on several occasions to visit Juan. One time we found him all alone. His family, with the rest of the town, had gone into a religious procession. Of course, he'd never seen one. So we borrowed his bicycle and put Juan on it and joined in the procession itself. It was his first time outside of the house, the first time he'd looked at people from a level higher than the ground, his first procession. His parents were momentarily annoyed, but their attitude changed gradually. When we thought it was right to raise the idea, we asked that at the next town meeting if we could raise money to send Juan to Lima for physical rehabilitation. Everyone liked the idea, and Juan went off to the big city. He had a long, hard struggle with much pain and effort. But one day he returned to the village. He was using braces and a cane. It was very hard for him. But as he began to walk down the streets to his home, people came out of their own homes. They appeared from all over. They were cheering and clapping, and they followed him all the way home. It was so wonderful. It was Juan's second procession. It's difficult. I have had many ups and downs. That's the thing about a progressive crippling disease, more and more pain and disability. It keeps on pushing you, making more demands, forcing you to greater discipline. But I have seen much service born of suffering, and I see that our little suffering is not for ourselves. It can have impact throughout the world, and that's how much our lives can mean. That's how much is possible. And I have been with people who would cry over that message, cry and cry. And I have cried too. Wow, that was a big chapter, and it took me a really long time to read, but am I ever glad I did? Okay. So, thank you, everybody. As we prepare to leave this sanctuary, we offer our deepest gratitude to the co-creators and pioneers who continue to sustain this space. Your service is a living prayer. We dedicate the merit of this gathering to the journey of every soul present as you return to your individual path. Remember that your greatest act of seva is the kindness you show yourself. May you continue your self seva with the same devotion you give the group. We release the stories shared here into the vault of confidentiality. We leave the roles of helper and helped behind, returning to the simplicity of being. So gently knowing you are never truly walking alone. Ram Ram. And to our foundational co-creators, there is a special kind and a specific kind of bravery required to build a bridge that's never existed before. By combining the teachings of loving awareness and the principles of intentional peer support, you didn't just start a group. You initiated a shift in how our two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, questioning, intersex, and asexual, plus everybody else, community, experiences, spirituality. So we thank you for your vision, seeing the intersection where our identities and our souls meet, your courage, navigating the grist of organizational growth and a quiet mind, and your self-seva. For every hour you spend in meditation, in therapy, or in nature, because that inner work is what makes the outer work possible. You have taught us that to love, serve, and remember is not a burden, but a joy when shared in mutuality. We honor your path, we celebrate your service, and we stand on the shoulders of your love. Ram, everybody.
You can have it just by desiring it. Instead of desiring a car, maybe the car will go. And desire a guru or a good spiritual friend.